In an industry stuffed with marketing bullshit, empty promises, and shiny suited liars, one woman's had enough. She knows what it's like to have the wrong clients, no money, and no time for fun. But she also knows how to fix it. And on the Business for Superheroes show, she promises to tell the down and dirty truth about business, sales, and running away with the circus. Here's your host, Vicky Fraser.
Welcome to the Business for Superheroes show. I'm Vicky Fraser, and this week I'm talking to a special guest about something most people are terrible at doing. We're going to try and help you get better at it. We're going to be talking about the dreaded headline. So I have asked an honest-to-goodness headline expert to come and talk to us. He is chief sub-editor at The Times, no less, and he eats headlines for breakfast, and his name is Mark Silver. Mark, thank you so much for coming on the show, and welcome.
Hi, Vicky. Hello, superheroes. This is going to be fantastic. I'm so pleased to be asked to come on. Headline writing is tricky, but it's also fun. And I would advise people not to forget that.
Cool. Well, that is really good advice. So let's start with you. Who are you and what do you do? Tell us a bit about what it's like being an editor at The Times.
Okay, so my name's Mark. I work as a chief sub at The Times, which effectively means not just subbing the stories, and you're trying to get the text to the link, so that the copy part of things is extremely important. But also I write the headlines, I design pages, I work out running orders with the editors for sort of some shifts. Sometimes I'm working very late into the night when most of the editors have gone home, so I'm sorting out the running order for if new stories come in after 10 o'clock for our second editions. So a great sort of variety of things. Really. It's a very, very enjoyable job. Headline writing is one part of it, sure, but it's the best part.
Okay, cool. So why do you enjoy writing headlines so much?
Well, I enjoyed reading newspapers when I was 6 years old. It was one of those funny things. I was very lucky. I knew what I wanted to do when I was a child. I used to read the sports pages of the papers almost as soon as I could read to, a certain level. I did football reports when I was 14 years old, got my first job 3 days after my first A level. It's just what I wanted to do. Then what I found was I wasn't a great reporter, but I was very good at grammar and I liked the headline side of things. So instead of going out and talking to people, I just sat in the office all day, story after story after story, headline after headline after headline. And it's the best job I could imagine for myself, I think. I love it.
Cool. Oh, it's always good to talk to somebody who loves what they do.
And it's fantastic. And you get to read a variety. So a lot of people don't like desk jobs and go into journalism because they don't want to do a desk job. I found out it suited what I did best. And I think that's, as everyone always says, that's always the best thing you should do. Find the thing that you enjoy most and suits your skills the best. If they happen to marry up, then good. You're lucky.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so let's dig into the important stuff. What have you always got in your mind when you're writing and editing articles? What's kind of the most important thing for you?
Without sounding flippant, it's always the reader. Always. When I'm editing a story, I'm trying to guide the reader from the start to the finish. And sometimes the writer will say what they want to say, but almost think of themselves or what they're trying to put forward. But you really have to put yourselves in the shoes of the person who's reading it and thinking how are they going to get from the start of the story to the finish without stumbling. And this means having good grammar all the way through, no confusion, nothing that contradicts, nothing that's going to stop them, because there's no reason why they have to read the story up to the end. And if there's anything that sort of stops them or makes them have to think, they won't think. Well, why would you? You're not going to try and work things out. You then move on to the next story. So when you're writing, the cleaner and the clearer and the most grammatically correct you can make it, the better. Obviously, if it's interesting, or the more interesting the story is, obviously the better as well. But even very interesting stories, badly written, will always falter. You're just not going to get there. And the same really goes with headline writing. You're trying to signpost the story. I mean, when I sort of you think of a headline, almost like it's like the trailer for a film. You've got to get the tone in the headline. You've got to get the tone just correct, so the headline doesn't clash with the story underneath. Or again, people are going to read the headline, read the story, think they were going to read something else, and then stop.
Yeah.
So you're thinking the baseline is to get a headline which is simple and understandable, but also sets the tone for what's coming up. And it's quite easy to forget when you're trying to write, if you're trying too hard to write a headline which is clever or funny, it might always not marry up with what's underneath. Yeah, and even with Sarah, as well as the translator, she has to write headlines for some of her articles, which are very dry and very technical. And you just can't do the funny stuff because it won't work. You just have to take what you're given in that respect and make the best of what is there. But you can't try and do something which doesn't marry up with what's underneath.
Yeah, that's a really good point, and it's something that that I notice a lot is people trying to be clever, trying to be funny, and that's not to say that you can't be those things, but trying to kind of be clever and funny for the point of it just is often ends up being confusing, as you've said. So, and like you said, headlines have a job to do. So, can you explain what the job of a headline is, what its most important job is? Because I think people don't quite understand that. I think they think, as I say, they think they need to be clever, they think they need to be funny. So, what is the headline? Most important job?
It should be attractive. It should be eye-catching. But oddly enough, it's not as hard as it sounds if the content underneath is good. So if from the point of view of the people hoping to listen to this podcast, if they were writing a blog or a post or an email which is entertaining and your words are correct and your words are good, you're happy with words, it's entertaining, it's fun, it's just doing what you need it to do. Once you've got that in place, the headline is just a signpost to get them to read the first line. All you're trying to do, so you don't have to work terrifically hard. You could just do a straight headline, describe what's underneath with a bit of colour, a bit of life, but not working too hard, and it will just hopefully drag people to what's underneath, because by definition, what's underneath is worth reading. So you can just signpost it. You don't need to work that hard at it. You can then, as you get more experienced and get a better handle of it, you can start to work in some, if you like, some wordplay or to some colour, or to do little strap lines on your email that sort of tease it a little bit more. You can do that, but I would wait a little while just to get comfortable with just doing good, solid headlines or strap lines, which just encourage people to go to the story underneath. Again, I think trying too hard too early won't work. Just a straight headline very often, as long as it matches the content underneath and the content underneath is interesting, will get you there.
Yeah.
And if you look at most newspaper headlines, most newspaper headlines don't actually try very hard. The key is they're simple. They're just simple words put in the right order, and they make sense. Yeah. And even if it's only 4 words long, it's still a sentence. You're not sort of trying to try too hard. It's just a sentence. The headline will still flow, even if it's very, very short. It will still make sense.
Cool. So with that in mind, what are the elements of a good headline?
Most people sort of know from your emails and your sort of newsletters you put out with good words. Everyone sort of knows good words to sort of win and etc. Watch out for bad words. There are lots of bad words out there which people don't often hear about or are told about. Words like scheme, plan, proposal, all these things that when you might be pitching to people, it might be quite tempting to put the word proposal in, but it's an awful. There are a list of banned words, which is almost a list of good words. Generally, sort of dull words, proposal, scheme, even words like no. Certainly, from a newspaper point of view, we don't like putting negatives in headings. Now, from a copywriter's point of view, then I think there may be circumstances where that would work.
Sure.
Newspapers, we don't do no, we don't do fail.
Okay, can you explain why? That's interesting. Can you explain why that is?
Because we try to make stories about people doing things rather than not doing things, or things that are happening rather than not happening.
Okay, it's more about activity.
It is. It's going forwards rather than backwards. And headlines are funny. They work on a fairly subliminal way. You'll notice when you sort of, hopefully people do buy newspapers, you'll even see headlines which are in a bold font and headlines are in a light font. And without necessarily noticing it, the lighter font headlines just signal it's a lighter story. Before you've even read the headline, you know over in that sort of top right in the corner of the page is a light story, which you might want just because you've read lots of politics or something, you want something else. So you buy moves around the page. And obviously for you guys, it's slightly different. You don't have competing stories.
No, but that's absolutely fascinating. I didn't know about that because I used to work in PR, and that's a big surprise to me. But that's also going to be useful for those people who write newsletters with different stories in it. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, if you can sort of work on fonts, or just even so, you wouldn't necessarily have the fonts, but the tone is important when you're writing headlines. Just bear in mind, if you are putting something serious across, or you think it's important, but it's not your it's not your daily email where you're trying to entertain as well as sort of to inform. If you've got something which is really sort of serious and it is different to what your normal daily output, then make that clear in the headline. It's sort of said at the start. If it's a serious thing, do put it seriously, but make it simple. Just say what you're doing, one word after the other, very simply, and just let it just speak for itself, and don't try too hard. I mean, one thing about headlines I found is that if you've written the copy, your copy is good. The heading is the fun bit and the easy bit. And you can, if you want, if you're trying to think of ideas, just write down 10 headlines, stupid ones if you want, just over and over, with 10 minutes, just bang it out. But more often than not, your first headline idea will be the best. And if it's a bit long, you sort of write it out. And if it's 10 or 15 words long or something, see if you can edit it down and see if you can sort of get rid of some of the redundant words and really sort of tighten it up. It may not work. It may just be that you just can't get it done. But more often than not, your first headline will be the best. But at the start, if you want to just practice putting sort of 10 down, just silly ones, stupid ones, just anything that comes in your head, then you'll maybe sort of learn the discipline of how to make a quirky heading if you want, and how to make a straight heading if that's what's needed. At work, we don't get that luxury. But we've been doing it for so long now, it's not really an issue, it's more instinctive. But over time, it'll become instinctive for people as well. Just think about what you're trying to do, and you'll get there. But relax when you're doing it. You can't write a headline when your brain is tied into a knot because you're so stressed out and thinking, if these 5 words don't work, no one's going to read it. It's not the case. Just sit back, take a breath, and have a bit of fun with it. And if nothing works, just do a straight heading, and you'll be home and dry 9 times out of 10.
Cool. That's really. I love any advice that has fun in the title, because I'm all about bringing the fun back into business and marketing, because people take it too seriously. They really do. And it's business is a serious business, but it can be fun as well, I think. So, okay. So speaking of fun, what are the most common mistakes you see rookie writers make? The kind of thing you have to correct when it kind of gets to you. So specifically headlines, really, but anything kind of.
Well, actually, with the copy. I mean, you guys listen to the podcast, you're all smart. You're all sort of smart people. What I find at work, we deal with people who are very academically smart. They've been to the colleges and the universities, and they tend to wear their intelligence sometimes. In some cases, they wear their intelligence very heavily. So it comes across in the story, and you find this actually with younger writers too, of all sort of abilities. They try to tell the world how intelligent they are with nice long words and nice long sentences, and because you want to give the impression that you're a clever person, you're well read. It doesn't work. It really doesn't. The person on the other, the reader, again, it comes back to the reader. They don't care how intelligent you are. They care about what you're trying to tell them. And actually, intelligence comes through much more clearly with just well-written words. You don't need long words. You don't need to write approximately instead of about. You just don't do it because it puts people off and it looks like you're showing off. Just the cliche is always, it is sort of true. It's to write as if you're talking to your friend. Don't use language that you wouldn't normally use because people aren't impressed. Everyone knows these longer words anyway. It makes it harder to read. And when it comes to headlines, there are other sort of banned headline words. If only because they're banned because they can crop up very often if you're not careful. Especially in newspaper headlines, words like for, words like as. It's like linking two thoughts with an as in the middle. You try to avoid when you're writing a headline, the same little words, often like the joining words in a sentence, cropping up over and over. Like the word but is quite a nice device for saying this, but it's very easy to overuse it. So bear in mind, if you sort of keep a list of keep in mind the headlines you're sort of doing every day or every week, not to fall into a rut of doing the same things over and over, because it's surprisingly easy to do. Actually, just sort of to think of new ideas the whole time isn't that easy. Which is why sometimes doing the simple one, just rewriting your first paragraph in headline form, is often the best way to go. If you're just stuck for an idea, just do that, and you'll be fine. But there are times when you're feeling more confident, you're feeling that the article is a bit more fun, a bit more upbeat, you can try a bit more. And you can definitely sort of get through it that way. But just as far as mistakes go, don't try too hard to tell the world you're clever. The world doesn't really care that much.
That's such good advice, and I think that quite a lot of people fall into that trap out of a lack of confidence, really nervousness, and this need to be seen as kind of being clever and smart. And you're quite right that the smartness comes through with the simplicity of writing, because you're always writing for your reader. So that's really good advice. Thank you.
And also one thing, I would advise people to go and buy a newspaper today. Don't depress yourself with the news necessarily, but you'll be amazed. Headline writing in newspapers looks phenomenally easy. And you think that just looks like the easiest job in the world. And it isn't. But the headlines are just written simply because people don't tie themselves in knots trying to do something which isn't there. And, you do headlines in 2 minutes at work very often, and they're perfectly fine. And no one's thinking, it's just like a simple headline. That's not good. They read it and it's fine. It does its job. It does its job.
Cool, that's good advice as well. Go look at the newspapers, look at the newspaper headlines. I have a couple of sites I visit regularly that I just go and look at what headlines are doing well, because, you guys know your stuff, you know what works and what doesn't. And so, it's daft to not pay attention to that. And speaking of knowing your stuff, and how do you measure a good headline? If you're looking at it from the point of view of an editor, I know we've covered this a little bit, but what to you makes a really good headline?
Tone, first off, is important. It has to match up the words that are underneath. Again, it's more about, oddly enough, it's more about removing the bad words, if there are any. You find it's especially with sort of new sub-editors, the skill of making every single word count is quite tricky. Now, if you're doing an email strap line, you've got a bit more flexibility. If you're doing like a newsletter or something, you've even more. I mean, with headlines in newspapers, you're trying to get the headline to within half a character of the size that's been allocated. If you really are, it's ever so precise. And to get the right words in that space, obviously sort of takes time and practice. But you're telling the story. If you can, if you, I would advise someone today, on a pitch, go and buy the Times or go and buy the Sun. You will see in certainly every page, because of the way we try to mix up the light with the dark, a headline with some wordplay in there. What you try and do is, if at all possible, get one of your words to do two jobs. Now, it's could be like, you talk about puns, for instance, it's got one sort of an easy way to think about it. But you'll find that there's a headline that can almost be read two ways, but it links two thoughts, is fantastic. Now, it's actually it's quite difficult to explain, but if you sort of see a paper, and again, when you read a paper, you don't even notice it because it's doing its job very, very quietly. But if you go and buy a newspaper, you'll see what I mean with words that just tell a little bit more in sort of 4 or 5 words. It will just give you two thoughts instead of one by one word doing a particularly clever job, and just lightening the tone. Again, this is generally in the lighter headings rather than the darker ones, but it's very effective. And I advise anyone, you don't have to read the story. I find I totally understand people who say, I'm a small business owner, I don't read the newspaper because it triggers me too much. I get too annoyed, I can't get more work done. I sort of understand that. But if nothing else, go to the World section. World sections of the Times is just the best section in the world. It's funny, it's interesting. Look at those headlines and you'll see exactly what I mean in practice every single day.
Cool, thank you for that. And I think it's an inevitable question. What's your favourite headline? What are the best headlines you've seen? The most enjoyable ones for you?
Weirdly, it's tricky because I was thinking about this, and I see good headlines every day. Literally every single day. You go and buy the Sun, go and buy the Times, whichever one you want to. The Mail, for all of its, whatever you think about the Mail, writes incredible headlines. It really, really does. Though the website doesn't so much because the website is trying to get search engine optimization, which means it dilutes it. But the paper itself is incredible at doing what it needs to do. If I can be sort of slightly flippant, I'll tell you back to when I'll give you one of my headlines if you like. In about 2000, I was very lucky to be working on genuinely the only tabloid newspaper, the only tabloid local newspaper in the country, in Margate. Okay. And tabloid headline writing is much harder, but it's much more fun. And we had a story about a woman who was a referee for the Kent League, and she was getting all sorts of abuse for the fact she was a woman, because it's not great now, but even then she was literally the only one. And it's quite an old school heading, you couldn't really do it now. But the heading was in 4 words, "Knockers won't stop me," because she was determined to carry on doing it. Yeah. It's just, again, you sort of take again one word which really wouldn't appear in the papers now necessarily, but to get sort of an idea that one word just does 2 little jobs and it adds a bit of sort of brevity into it.
I think that's a great headline.
Also, there are great ones also working headlines, again, maybe more than what you'll get in your things, but headlines that talk to the story but also talk to a picture are incredibly effective. You think back when I started Falklands and Kelvin McKenzie had the gotcha heading with the Belgrano. It's heading, if you ever have pictures or nice pictures with your copy, and it's sort of not a stock picture but a real picture which may or may not work, anything that sort of ties in the story to the heading are fantastic. But as I say, it's actually quite difficult for me to think of good headings because I genuinely see them every single day. I'm extremely lucky to work with the people I do, because they're exceptionally good. Just buy a paper today, look at the headings, and I guarantee when you actually start looking at them properly and thinking about what they're trying to do, you'll see just how effective they are.
Okay, that's really cool. You gave us a great example of a really good headline there. Knockers won't stop me.
Thank you.
That just amuses me. I'm easily amused, but I think that's really cool. I'm probably going to pinch that and use it in one of my emails at some point because it's just perfect.
And slight rudeness isn't. It's not the worst thing. It's something that is actually when I wrote that headline. Actually, headlines like that were sort of done all the time. We wouldn't see it nearly so much now. But do break it up every so often when you have the confidence to do so. Break it up with something like you say all the time. Grab attention as much as you can do, and do it with a smile on your face. It really makes a difference.
Hell yeah! If you can make people smile, they're far more likely to part with their cash, and that's what this is all about. So, okay, cool. So I was kind of wondering whether we'd have time for me to throw in a cheeky question, and I think I'm just going to do that. So because at the moment I'm talking about PR in my Superheroes in a Circle, and PR is awesome free advertising for people if they can get it. So. What would give someone the best chance of pitching you and getting an article or a comment in the paper?
I think you would need to have followers. I don't just mean from a starting position. You would need to have a crowd behind you, and I mean by that not just like Facebook, a million Facebook followers. You would need to be doing something which is creating some interest and some buzz, and which is changing things slightly. Now, I know it seems like an exceptionally high bar, But unfortunately, where I work, it's sort of, that's where it is. If you look at maybe the Times 2 section of our work, you'll see, these people really are doing something quite special. It is different. No, it's not impossible. Though, if you sort of say, I'm doing something which is changing the way people think, which is changing the way people behave, even if it's not to a massive degree, but you've got like a loyal and devoted crowd behind you, and you're changing their behaviour or actions, then you're onto something. Because newspapers love trends. Often the trends they love, you sort of think that's just a North London trend which is here today, gone tomorrow. But that's what they're after. They're after something which is happening now, which hasn't really happened before. Okay. That's what they're after. So if you've got something like that and you've got a devoted crowd behind you, then you can come to me or the paper and say, this is happening. Even in my small neck of the woods, this is happening, this is changing, this is moving. And then you've got to shout. Otherwise, just generally, I think you've said this before as well, go to trade magazines or to local papers who will be grateful for your content, and as long as you're sort of the publication you're pitching to is going to reach your audience, then that's great too. That it really is. I wouldn't discount thinking, if I don't get in the Times, it's not really worth doing. There are lots of avenues for you to go down to get publicity. The Times, by definition, its bar is quite high, but it is not impossible. You just need this sense of movement behind you to sort of to get in there and then to grow. But I presume maybe some people that's in many cases that's what you're trying to do.
Exactly, yeah.
That may be sort of an aim in itself, just thinking if I really, really get this thing together, then at this point I can pitch it and I can really sort of try and get a big PR. And maybe that may be an incentive. But there's always publications out there that will be interested in what you'll do as long as you go to the right place.
Thank you for that. That's a little nugget of pure gold there. And I'm really glad I got to chuck that in at the end, because I only want to really work with people who want to change the status quo in some way. And, I think everything that every small business is doing is trying to improve the world. I bloody hope they are trying to improve the world in some way. And, as long as you're doing that, as long as you're making that change, you're going to be creating that buzz for yourself. And that's what you need to kind of bring out and pitch to anybody that you want to talk about it for you. So that's really, really valuable. Thank you for that. We're running out of time, sadly. I'm sure I'm going to have you on the show again in the future to talk about to talk more about PR, because I think that's a really valuable topic. But in the meantime, where can people find out more about you and your work and the Times?
I have a Facebook page, which I don't really use very much, actually. I think, weirdly, the thing about being a sub editor is that you work, you're invisible. Your name gets in the paper. No one knows you exist, sort of thing. But that's okay. I'm perfectly comfortable with that. Certainly with the Times and with the Sunday Times, which I used to work for, I would just advise by it. It's fantastic, and you will learn an awful lot. From my point of view, I am not particularly visible, not through necessarily because I want to remain invisible. I just my job doesn't require that, and I don't particularly sort of chase it. Which isn't a great answer. I do apologise, but
it kind of is a good answer, because now it's like, well, okay, go buy the Times, and and if you read the Times, you read the headlines, people will be seeing you there, because they'll see your touch on the paper.
You will. You just won't know it's me. That's fine.
But they do now, because you're here and you're talking. Cool. Okay, so that's sadly all we've got time for, but that has been a fantastic interview. Thank you so much for coming on. I've really, really enjoyed it. I've learned some new stuff myself. I know that everybody listening is going to have learned a ton of really, really valuable stuff. So thank you so much for coming on and your generous sharing of your knowledge.
My pleasure. It was great fun. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so next week there is going to be more gin and marketing banter from me and Joe. Joe will be back, so Joe fans will be happy. If you liked this podcast, please go to iTunes and subscribe, and please leave us a review because it will help more people find us and laugh at us. Or, if you don't want to leave a review, please share it. If you know someone who'll enjoy it, send them a link, vickyfraser.com/podcast. And if you're ready to start making waves and doing things differently, go to businessforsuperheroes.com/inner-circle, and we will welcome you with open arms into our little fold. So thanks very much, listeners. I'll be back next week. If you be good, if you can't be good, don't get caught. And ta-ra.
Like what you've just heard? Tell your colleagues, tell your friends, send them to www.businessforsuperheroes.com/podcast.